Coming up next.
I think first thing is it's got to be relationship building. So once you kind of develop a relationship with your students, it should ideally make things a little easier for you to teach them. I think once they understand you as a teacher and what your intentions are for them, I think it's all about relationship that you have with your kids, right?
The Job Talk podcast shares stories from people who are passionate and love what they do in their careers. Through conversation, we explore their careers, past work experiences, and the education that got them to where they are now. We are putting together a Career Crisis Ultimate interview series. We are asking experts to give their best advice and guidance around work anxiety, career pressures, career goal setting, and ultimately, career transformation. To learn more about this special interview series and get notified when it's available, please visit our webpage at thejobtalk.com/help.
Today's guest is Peter Medina. Here's our job talk with the junior high teacher. Peter, I know we both share an extreme love for the Edmonton Oilers. Unfortunately, this isn't a hockey podcast. This is a career podcast, so I won't be asking you any questions about
Probably
that.
a side, that'll be a side episode or something.
Exactly.
Like a playoff edition.
Maybe. Well, yeah. Free agents can start signing tomorrow, so this would be good timing. But yeah. I'm here to talk to you about being a junior high school teacher. And my first question for you is, why did you decide to become a teacher?
Well, I think it was a couple of reasons. I think, my dad was a mechanical engineer, so I think at that point I looked at it, it's like, that looks like a lot of hard work. And then he had Asian parents, I think, have this dream for you that you're going to be like a pharmacist or a dentist or a doctor. I'm like, I don't know if I can, I don't think I have the brains for that one. So I'll try to do something and make myself useful. And education, I think, was important to my dad. So I think that was part of it. I had some really phenomenal teachers growing up. So I think that also influenced me, getting into education. And then high school, I had a couple high school teachers, I never necessarily talked to them about going into education, but just the way they carried themselves, super organized and just passionate about what they taught. I thought that's kind of I could see myself doing that. And then you think about just your own life through elementary or junior high school. Sometimes I think it's you see kids that I think myself, you don't get the fair shake in that, at that age as a teenager, or a young individual, and you get kids pick on you and stuff like that. So maybe it's just kind of looking at my own life as a child or a youth and going, okay, well, what kinds of things I learned and faced that was hard that I can try to correct with this generation of youth, right? So try to make them a little bit better than kids treated me as well, I think, too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what was your first post-secondary experience?
So post-secondary experience, actually ended up doing a science degree, or a Bachelor of Science degree at Concordia in Edmonton. And I thought like maybe the journey was going to take me through like high school science and go through something like that. And this is sort of like a backup plan. And then when I went to the U of A, they had after degrees. So I did a 2-year after degree after my Bachelor of Science. And, you know, there like a decision could have been made, go into elementary education or go into secondary education. Then all that time there was, I think it was fresh off the talk of like high school shootings in the States and stuff. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to go into like high school shooting or like a high school situation where they've got, you know, shootings and stuff. Not that like, you know, now when you look at it in the news now, it's like shootings happen in any like level of school, right?
Yeah.
So that deterred me from going into high school, and I actually ended up going into like elementary ed, you know, to start there. So I did my after degree into that for post-secondary.
Is that when you have to make the decision of which stream you're going to go into?
Not necessarily. So like, as you see now, like I ended up as a junior high teacher. So my training is in elementary, and I did, I think, 6 years of it, and then opportunity just presented itself. So I think having that science degree also kind of backed like myself up as like eventually I became a science teacher, right? Like for junior high. So I teach currently like grade 7 science. Next year is going to be grade 8 science. I've done grade 9 science as well too. So I don't think you necessarily need to make that decision. Maybe it's what you're passionate about at the time, or like, you know, influence that's around you. But then, you know, some people, they end up making that decision right away. Like a former student of mine wants to get into education next year, actually. And so he talked to me, and his major is math, and I think his minor is physics. So he's determined to get into secondary education. So that's a decision he's making, right? Whereas if you look at my story, it's like, okay, I went elementary, I decided to teach elementary, and then at the school that I was at, it happened to be an elementary junior high school.
Yeah.
So, I kind of was walking around one day, and then they're kind of looking for staffing next year, and they said, hey, how would you like to try junior high? And like at that time I was teaching grade 6, and then I'm like, well, I guess how different could it be as you go into grade 7 or 8 or 9? And I said, well, yeah, like let's try it, right? So that happened, and I've never looked back since, right? So it's been I guess I identify more as a junior high teacher now.
You look young. I'm sorry, did you say it was a former student that is looking into a career as a teacher?
I won't actually drop names, but like how we all kind of know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that former student is he's actually, when I talked to him, he's planning to start his student teaching this October.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's great. Can you remember the first day you walked in to teach your very first class? How were you feeling, and how did your first day go?
Oh, okay. Well, I think that one was about survival. So I did several interviews in August, and it kind of started to take me further south of Edmonton. So I think if I remember, I had like an interview in Ponoka, and then an interview in Red Deer, and then like finally an interview in Calgary, right? I think after that, like if I didn't nail the Calgary interview, the next one would have been Okotoks. So it just kind of kept going down like Highway 2, right? So I interviewed on a Wednesday, I think. And then I actually ended up staying, like it was a later interview in the day. Like I thought I would just drive down to Calgary, go for the interview, and then just drive back up, right? And anyways, I ended up it was a later interview, so I'm like, oh, I'll just stay in Calgary for the day after, right, and hang out there for a little bit. And then I drove home, and didn't think much of it, but I felt like the interview went really well. I think Thursday I found out I got the job. I told my parents, like, hey, I'm moving to Calgary. like I was living with my parents at the time, so I really just had my room to move out, right? So, and then I also had to find a place, like, while I'm packing and all this kind of stuff in the meantime. And right now I'm not thinking about, the first day of school. I'm just thinking, okay, how am I going to get from Edmonton to Calgary in a matter of a few days, be there, like, for when I need to be there, and then, like, actually get the place and, start now actually thinking about the job, right? And then I think by Friday or Saturday I was driving south, and then I had found a place, talked to them, like got the rent kind of like covered and everything, moved in, and it was just like throw everything in the place, said bye to my parents, hey, thanks for helping me move down here, like, in your support, and we'll see where this goes. It's like first job, it's exciting. And then it was like Saturday, Sunday, I'm like, okay, wrap my head around grade 3, go into Monday. That's kind of when you're hanging out with like the staff, kind of getting coordinated for the first day and like what you're going to do for the year. And they're like, well, there's been a change, so you're actually going to move up to like grade 5, 6 now, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of welcome that. It's a little bit older crowd, right? But now your head's got to switch, and it's like, okay, I did my student teaching in grade 5 and 6. I should have that experience. I should be okay, right? And then next thing you know, like it's Tuesday, the kids arrive, and it's just like, it was like my room was kind of bare bones because at the time I didn't really know what I was teaching. Like it jumped from one thing to the other. Just met the kids on the first day and just survived till like, I think it was a 9 to 3 school day. And by that time I was like exhausted, right? Like it's a whirlwind like tour to get into that first like job.
Well, so, it's a big transition, your first job, but I want to focus on your career as a junior high school teacher. And over your career as a junior high teacher, what surprised you the most, do you think? Have you experienced surprises through your career that you weren't really expecting?
I think that I'd have to say the biggest surprise is COVID. That was, I think, the one thing that like was not like, no one could expect. And this isn't just for the teaching job, right? This is for everybody, right? So that was the biggest surprise, like, I think in my career that I would never want to go back to again. You know, I could say that probably for a lot of teachers, like to be teaching over a computer screen, it's one thing I wouldn't recommend. And you can start to see the effects now of how, like, now that we have all of the students back in person, at least the ones that wanted to learn that way, which is majority of them, it makes such a difference. But you can also see how that timeline has affected, like, students now in their learning and like them attaining concepts or trying to deliver concepts to them, which you would expect that they have the background knowledge to advance, right?
I watched my grade 5 son walk around the house, often shirtless, with his Chromebook. So I understand why you were looking at black screens. And I would see him out in his fort in the backyard. I would see him in the kitchen, downstairs. He was everywhere.
I think the scams that you could like have a kid do, right? Like, that black screen's on, but it says that they're in the meeting, and it's like, yeah, you could call on them and like you wouldn't get a response, right? Because they were somewhere else.
Well,
right?
I've seen those videos online where somebody will pretend that their video froze, but the ceiling fan will still be rolling behind them. So I'm sure there's lots of tricks that the students picked up on. I want to ask you though, have you noticed how the pandemic changed students? Have students changed now that you've been back in the classroom after a pandemic? I think
it's you can see like their social behaviors, like some are really awkward, right? Just even, normally any other year, like if they were on a roll, you could have this like fluid like discussion on any topic or whatever, right? And just be like, kids would be eager to like share and everything, right? And the discussions would be, not like they'd be painless. For me this year, like I felt like it was just like still talking to those screens. Kids so reluctant to speak when they should, like, right? And as a grade 7 math teacher, like I had to kind of cut and snip certain parts out because like that's where our first, like, how do we transition these kids into like now online learning, and what do you cut out? What can you get them through? What do you expected of them, like to get through the year? So yeah, I would have to say that some things were cut out, right? Then look at the grade 8s now that I taught this year. They would have been the grade 7s. So you can start to see like how that's affecting them, especially in math, right? Like science is one of those subjects where it's not necessarily progressive on some of the stuff that happened in the year past, but math, you can totally see like the damage like the pandemic has done towards learning. More on the academic side, as well.
What about behavior? Have you noticed a difference between pre and post pandemic with behavior of kids?
The school that I'm at, they're pretty good kids to begin with, so I not a lot of behavior issues. I think it's just more of the awkwardness, them being so used to like just kind of doing whatever they wanted to on their own time, and if they wanted to play those games and hide and not show up to class and keep the screen off, that's where it does, I think, affect them now as an in-person learner, because they're like, holy, I actually need to be accountable now because I'm actually here in the school, right? So I don't think that behavior can continue on. So, but they're not malicious kids at the school that I teach at. They're pretty good to begin with. So I think that blip in the pandemic there, like, I think they also, some of them I think realize like, holy, like, I've just done a number to myself, and then they kind of start to take things seriously. But I think some of them are still kind of in that mindset where it's like, okay, I'm in person, I still don't care, right?
How do you handle a reluctant learner? Wait, I'm going to ask you first, how long has your teaching career been, Peter?
So this September is the start of 19 years. So
19 years.
19 years.
So through your 19-year career as a teacher, I imagine you've seen every type of student, and you've probably learned different techniques on how to get through to them. How do you handle a reluctant student? And that could also mean maybe behavior issue with the student as well.
Yeah, I think first thing is it's got to be relationship building. So once you kind of develop a relationship with your students, it should ideally make things a little easier for you to teach them, right? Sometimes I think the buy-in's going to be hard, especially depending on the topics that you're trying to teach. For me, like, I'm heavily focused on science and math. So I think sometimes it's not their jam, right? It's like they excel in other things. But, I think the first thing is once you've got that relationship with them, you tell them like, and you're honest with them and just say like, hey, you know what? I know that maybe this isn't the topic that you're strong at, but like I'm here to help you, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing that you got to let them know. I'm not here to work against you. There might be times where we might clash, but it's not because I'm trying to give you a hard time purposely. It's because I just want what's best for you, right? And I think once they understand you as a teacher and what your intentions are for them, I think it's all about relationship that you have with your kids, right? I think if there's no common ground or you're not trying to seek a relationship with them, I think it makes it even more difficult to try to get them to learn a subject that they are already reluctant to learn, right? So I think you've got to show them like what you're here for, what you can do for them. You acknowledge that like they might be struggling, but you just want the best for them. So and the importance of it.
Do you apply the same technique to their parents when you're talking to their parents?
I think the hard part is like the relationship, like they might like, it depends on the support that you get with them, right? Yeah. Some love like the teachers that we have here at the school that I work in, they know that we're trying to do the best for them. I think some parents, it's a whole spectrum of them, right? So it's like they're behind their kid and they support him a lot, or you can have the ones that like, just, like do what you want, right? Sometimes you're not going to get that support from the parents, or sometimes they don't like you, right? Like, I think that's the thing, right? So you're not going to win them all, but you gotta, I think after 19 years, it's kind of like, you can't take things personally. You just have to roll with it. And I know that I'd have to say a lot of teachers wear their heart on their sleeve, so to speak. And, sometimes when things don't go well, or you get criticized by a parent, or you clash, they take it personally, right? And I know there've been times, I think myself too, like I've taken things a little personally and it eats me a little bit, but then it's okay. You can't let this like bother you. It's one probably out of say, like on average, say 30 kids. If 29 other kids are liking you and they're rolling with it and you're doing the best you can for them, then you're doing an all right job. If it's one, like I don't think you can let it bother you, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Having kids and being a teacher, I feel one of the best attributes is having a thick skin. Peter, what do you love best about being a junior high teacher?
Every day through the year, it's like, it's never the same, right? So it's always going to be dynamic. You're always going to move. It's going to be different. Some days you don't know what to expect, but I think if you start your day and you go, okay, this is going to be a good day, that like you tell yourself it's going to be a good day, who knows? It might end up crappy at the end of it, right? But I think for the most part, like, it's always going to be a different day. There's always different challenges. There's different things going on. It's always, it's a go kind of feel. And before you know it, it's like the day is over, right? I don't think I've ever felt like, this day seems just long. I don't think I've ever felt that way. I think it's because things are always changing, I think, as you go through the course of a day.
Yeah.
So
what are some misconceptions about junior high school teachers?
I think the number one thing is just as soon as the day starts, say call it a 8 to 3 job or a 9 to 3 job, that's where you spend your hours. And then like as soon as you walk out the door at 3 o'clock or whatever, that's the end of your day, right? I think a lot of people think that, but I think I'll give you an example here. So for me, like I'm married to teachers, so she gets me, right? Like she understands, why are you staying late or why are you invested in like some work at home or whatever, right? So I think those are some of the misconceptions. When you look at like somebody that is married to a teacher, they're in a relationship and the other partner is not in the teaching profession, they question it. It's like, well, why are you not spending time with me? Or why do you have to do this on the weekend? It takes a little while. So I think like a friend of mine was dating somebody that was not a teacher. And then that was kind of the thing that was going on in their relationship. Like it took him a while to realize, why are you doing this? Right. And that's the thing. Like I think that's one of the biggest, I think it still exists. Teaching's been around for like ages. But it's that 9 to 3 or 8 to 3 kind of like thing. You never have to take anything home, or as soon as you walk out the door, you just not look back, and that's it. Just this most recent last part of the year, like I was spending after 3 o'clock to about 4:30. I'm coaching track, right, to get kids ready for a track and field event. That takes me to 4:30, and then leaving the building, like still wrapping up stuff like afterwards, and I'm probably out the door by 4:45, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an early starter, so like usually I'll be at the school at 7:30. I think that's kind of one of those things you like legally. I think we're supposed to be there 15 minutes before the start and 15 minutes after, but I'm just there. Like I don't want to be that guy that like something happens on the hen day or whatever, and you're stuck and you're not actually at work, right? So I don't want to be that guy.
What is the most rewarding gift you've received from a student at the end of the year? Because I believe that still happens, doesn't it? Students will bring in things for their teacher.
Yeah, like as a junior high teacher, it gets a little. I get a little less and less, I think. Just,
they got to up their game a little bit, maybe.
If you're looking at like more emotional like gifts, I think. Sometimes it's just words that kids say. Like I was a grade 9 homeroom at one point, and it's just cool like to hear some kids that leave grade 9 and like they call you the GOAT, right? So yeah,
the greatest of all time.
It's the greatest of all time. I think that's like some of the most memorable like emotional gifts I've got versus like say physical. Because I am a junior high teacher, it's starting to get to that part where you're teaching younger siblings of kids that are now like either graduated high school or going into university and stuff. And they came back to visit like this year. So I'm chatting with kids that are entering like their first year of university or some of them like into second year university. And you're chatting with them and you're finding out like, okay, or like not even university, like even post-secondary at NAIT or something. And so I think that's the other gift that you can, that I really love about the job. It's they tell you what they're up to. They're still learning. I think that's what's really important. Like, I could care less like, what they're doing afterwards. It's just, I think what's most important is that they didn't drop out of school, right? Like they didn't give up on it. And I think for them to come back and say, hey, you know what, like this is what I'm doing. And you're just like, wow, I taught you like so long ago, but you figured it out. You're doing something now that's productive. It's exciting. Just some of the things that they said that they were getting into. Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a neat feeling to see like, hey, I'm teaching your younger brother or sister right now. I taught you like years ago, and this is what you're up to. I think that's one of the other most rewarding gifts you can get from this job.
Are you amazed at how you can, like, over a 19-year career, I don't even know what the numbers of students that you would have taught. Are you surprised sometimes that you will remember a student from like 18 years ago?
To be honest with you, I don't know if they call it like, being face blind or something, but sometimes like you would encounter a student, but you had to, you were wearing masks at the time. So all you could see is just their eyes. And it's like, okay, you've gotten older. I know who you are, but I don't remember your name. So I'm at that stage now. It's like, I'm starting to forget names. With some of them, like depending on, how often they visit or how often they like if they did something memorable or they made a comment or whatever, you might remember those names, like either positive or negative comments. Like sometimes when they say, oh yeah, my younger brother is this, and then you get their last name, it's like, oh, okay, now I remember you, right? Like, so that's some of them, but they'll always remember me. That's like one name they had to like remember, right? So yeah, I usually say at the beginning of the year, like when I'm trying to remember names, I'm like, yeah, be patient with me. Like I got like, say 90 names to remember. You only have to remember one, right? It's just me, right? So
exactly.
Just be patient. And then it's things that they'll do, I think, over the course and how often you teach them as well too. Sometimes you'll remember those names a lot more. So
yeah. What are some challenges that teachers are facing in the next little while, do you think?
When I first started teaching, even as an elementary teacher, there wasn't a lot of talk about, or mental health, right? Yeah. So I think now that it's, there's still like stigma there, like as a health teacher as well too. I try to break down those walls and to tell kids like, hey, you know what, people struggle with mental health, right? I think, the pandemic has done a number on mental health for students as well too. And the effects are like further coming down, right? So I think that's the other one, looking at students and the complexity of their mental health as well too, I think is a huge one. So you can see when I first started my career, there was really no talk about it, right? But now when you now that I'm like later in my career, it's something you advocate for and make sure the well-being of your students is taken care of, right? So I think that's another large one that that teachers are facing. You look at like equity and diversity and anti-racism and inclusion, right? So you're looking at that as well too. So, I think newer teachers, get it more like now versus say older teachers, right? So older teachers may be struggling through like looking at like some old ways and just like the way that they've talked, right? Like, or spoken to students, right? So I think I'm at a good age where like I can adapt. And I think, people that may be a little bit older than me, like you're kind of stuck in your ways a little bit, right? So I think that's another one that like teachers have to be more cautious about, and another area of maybe difficulty that they're facing.
Peter, do you have any advice you could give to somebody that's considering a career as a teacher?
One of the cliches is just be prepared to work hard. I'd have to say, like, advice-wise, kind of going back to how I started my first year of teaching, it was like just this whirlwind tour of like, try to figure out what do you need to use and teach, and then just kind of survive you into your first week of school or your first day of school, and then, kind of get going from first month and then second month and so on. So I'd have to say, like, don't let working hard discourage you. Like it can be really rewarding. At times you might actually literally feel hopeless, right? So, but you know what? I think if you have a good work ethic, I think you'll survive. I think the other thing too is, depending on like what your relationship is, I kind of likened it to, when I started teaching, I was a single guy, and it's like, well, I didn't have to be, responsible or accountable to anybody. So I could feel like, okay, if I wanted to take a break year for myself, like I could do that. And then, like spend my Saturday, Sunday, like just consumed for like 8 hours and make it a working day, and then just work on stuff, right? That's the thing, right? But I think if you are in that relationship, make sure that they do understand that, like, you're going through this because you're trying to keep your survival afloat. As I kind of mentioned, like, some people that don't come from the education field, they don't understand why you're spending this many hours to work on something, or why it takes that much time. So find that balance, I think, is the other thing. And like I said, I've been doing this for 19 years, so I'm still trying to find balance. It's a little bit of a change now. Like, I've got two young kids, like a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, like, I'm trying to rediscover like where I could be with my kids and my wife, and then basically at the same time, like, what little pockets of time can I now use for myself to be doing some marketing or like resource development or something like that. So it's such a huge change from when I first started to where I am now. It's two different lifestyles. Looking back, like I said, it was just do what you want when you want. Nobody to really respond to, right? Like, and then you could work Saturday, Sunday, roll into Monday, and then like now you're making it a 7-day work week. Now it's like, okay, like I got to find pockets of time to still get that work in. And that kind of goes back to the question where it's like a myth debunked, right? Like, is it an 8 to 3 job? It really isn't. It seems like it could be, but there's all those little pockets of time that you're trying to squeeze out in your day to try and get something done for the next day or next 2 days or whatever it could be, right? So, like I said, it is a lot of hard work, but it could be rewarding.
You know what, Peter, thank you so much for the time that you have given us today. And maybe I'll do a follow-up interview with you when the Edmonton Oilers win the 2023 Stanley Cup next year.
Yeah, I would we'll have we'll have a drink and we'll plan the parade, all those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you for your time today, Peter. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Job Talk podcast. For more information, please visit us at thejobtalk.com. Our podcast music was created by our friend Mike Malone in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.